You get me, get you. You get me, feel it, you. You get me, get you. You get me, feel it, you. You get me, get you. You get me.
Welcome, welcome. I say welcome all the time, but maybe I don't know. I'm going to change that up. I'm going to change a lot of things up, actually. But anyway, we are talking politics and religion without killing each other. That's the part we're not changing, especially the without killing each other. That's important so that we don't kill each other. I'm your host, Corey Nathan. It is an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. And this is definitely one of those ways. So I'm just going to dive right in. I want to let you know that I'm going to change direction with these solo episodes. And what I mean is, over the last year or so, we started doing some of these about once a week, but sometimes I use the midweek episodes or the second episode per week. Sometimes I use it for something a little different or a guest that's a little different. But a lot of times it ends up being me just talking to you, and a lot of times that's just commentary on news of the week or an important story that's happening in the world, in our country. Sometimes it is how to talk about politics and religion without killing each other. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus a lot more on the latter. I'm going to focus on how to talk about politics and religion without killing each other, just how to do it. Partly because, listen, there's a lot of great analysts out there. There's a lot of great commentary out there. The stuff that I've been focusing on, whether it's important legal issues, I'm, I'm a self-proclaimed devoted pro-democracy activist, not pro-democratic party, but pro-democracy. Our democratic republic, our constitutional order, I've become a huge fan of that. And therefore, I've been doing some commentary on stories that brush up against that. I'm also a Christian and I grew up observantly Jewish. You all know that. So sometimes there are faith issues or the intersection of faith and politics, especially from those perspectives. Somebody who believes in the authority of Scripture, somebody who has a great deal of respect as an American for our constitutional order. So I've been making a lot of commentary on that. But listen, there's a lot of folks who are doing that great job and a much better job than I could do. I always think of David French and Sarah Isgur and their awesome podcast advisory opinions. There's nothing I can do that would even come close to the level of analysis and commentary that they provide on a show like that. And there's other legal podcasts as well that are doing a really good job, but that one's definitely top of mind. The Bulwark, the Dispatch in general do great job of commentary and analysis. The Dispatch in particular also does straight news from a conservative perspective. But that's just one out. And I should clarify, a Burkean or Buckleyan, even Sowellian conservative perspective, not what passes for conservatism today. But I guess that's commentary too. So I'm kind of going into it. So I do reserve the right to comment on issues as part of a larger theme. But what I wanted to tell you is that I'm going to be focusing on the how-to part. I'm going to be focusing specifically on how to talk about politics and religion without killing each other. Because listen, that's the one thing that we could provide to do a little bit of tikkun olam, addressing a problem in our world right now that folks don't know how to talk to each other. Folks don't know how to build bridges across these differences, these great divides. And I've had the pleasure of doing this program. I know it's a relatively short time, 4.5 years, but I've got to speak with some great minds, great thinkers, great leaders about exactly this and ask them the TP&R question. How do you do it? How do we do this better? How do you talk about politics and religion without killing each other? Or is it even possible? I think it's possible, and that's why I'm going to focus on it. So sometimes I'll be sharing experiences or stories, whether it's and I sat down with somebody, I was with somebody, or there was a more formal get together, and I spent time with an individual. Or conversations I curate online on Facebook, on Substack, on YouTube, or other platforms, and I'll share those experiences. I'll share stories and draw what I can in terms of how it went and what seemed to be effective, lessons that I learned from it, what I can do to do that thing better. So sometimes it'll be story oriented. Sometimes it'll be more pure how to. The three ways that you can talk to your Uncle Bob at Thanksgiving dinner without wanting to throw the sweet potatoes in his face. I don't know. Three tools of engaging with Uncle Bob. So sometimes it'll be pure how to. And so a lot of times it'll be a combination of both. I'll share a story and then, here are practical tools to engage, to talk about politics and religion without killing each other. So I just wanted to let you know that. And that's how we'll be doing it going forward. So one thing I do want to kind of set today's subject, I want to set the stage for, is that we have to remember that a lot of folks that we talk to, and sometimes we ourselves are in what's called an epistemic ecosystem, or an epistemic bubble. That's the term I've used in the past. And that means that people are in their own information spheres and they only watch certain news programs, they only read certain websites, they only listen to certain podcasts, and they're only talking to people who agree with them, and they're not getting any input from outside of those bubbles. So if you find yourself talking to someone, wherever it might be, a high school reunion, just an online conversation, somebody who's at your table at an event, or at the coffee shop that you go to, and you end up in a conversation with them and you realize, oh, wow, we are really far apart. I don't know, your barber or somebody like that. I was just having a conversation with a friend who, cuts my hair. Look at my hair. I still don't know what to do with it, but she does a great job. But we ended up in a conversation. I realized, wow, we are in such different informational ecosystems. And one of the things that I realized is, and I always have to remember, is that if you're sitting in that barbershop chair and you're there for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, you're not going to completely convert this person from, say, a devoted Sean Hannity watcher or Dan Bongino listener, or I don't know, Ann Coulter follow. Who pick your poison, right? You're not going to convert them in one conversation to considering other points of view. You can't. I can't even. So I've become a big advocate for outlets like Tangle News or Ground News, or just other outlets that provide different perspectives as part of their mission, right? Whether it's Ground News, who curates a lot of different sites and stories treatment, or different outlets treatment of a particular story, and they show you these are left-leaning organizations, these are centrist, traditionally centrist outlets, these are right of center, and they provide you with ways to go right to those stories and how they're treated. Or Tangle News, they'll treat one important story per day, and they give you just the facts, a really thoughtful way of presenting the news, what our friend Lisa Willie referred to as period news, just the facts. This is what happened, without commentary, and being even careful with the words and the language that they use to make sure that the very words that they use to present the story aren't packed with partisan leanings, right? And then they will provide what the left is saying. So they'll go to left-leaning outlets, three perspectives that the left presented on that story. Then they'll do the same with the right-leaning publications, or right-leaning stories and analysis. And then they provide their own take on that particular story. So that's a really good way to do it. It helps me as I read through it or listen to their podcast presentation of it. It helps me to think through in that order, to listen to the presentation of the news, and then start to develop, oh, this is how I'm beginning to think of it. And then to hear different perspectives from different sides, and then to think of it a little bit more, and then to hear Isaac Saul is the editor and the founder of Tangle, and then to hear his and see if what I'm now thinking of it and what he's now thinking of it comport. It's a great way to think through important stories. But anyway, that aside, you can't necessarily convince someone to even do that. Consider stuff outside of their ecosystem, right? Their informational ecosystem. But what you can do is you can drop seeds. It's like seasoning with salt or garlic, or just some seasoning, right? As you're making a recipe. Or another way to think of it is, you can't teach them a new language that they're then going to speak fluently, but you can introduce some vocabulary words. That's what I feel like I can do in one conversation. I've talked about it before as you can't change somebody by 180 degrees, but maybe you can have 1 degree of persuasion. Just as hopefully, if you have the right disposition, they might have 1 degree of persuasion on you that you might consider perspective that you hadn't before. But the big thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people are indeed in these informational ecosystems. As somebody who's become a friend, Mike Madrid, whose work I follow very closely, he had a great piece on his Substack. It's great transformation. I really encourage you to read it. Mike eats numbers for breakfast, as was often said on politicology. But one of the things that Mike said is that it's as if we're inhabiting different informational universes. So that's another way to put it. I was saying epistemic bubbles. Another way to think of it is that's a better way to put it, actually, but I give Mike a lot of credit for providing big ideas and really important concepts in approachable ways. So, informational universes. And he points out this isn't anything new. William Randolph Hearst, Joseph Pulitzer, Pulitzer or Pulitzer, somebody will correct me on that. Ben Franklin, they all participated in their day's version of fake news. So this isn't anything new. I was also listening to Renee DiResta, who was on this program about a year ago when her book Invisible Rulers. It's Invisible Rulers: The People Who Turn Lies into Reality. Great book, by the way. When that book came out, but I was listening to her on Village Squarecast, which is also a great podcast. I encourage you to listen to. I'm really proud to be a part of it, actually. Liz Joyner, the founder of Village Square, has become a good friend as well. And Renee was on that show, and she said something that really distilled how I feel about this. She shared a quote from the writer Philip K. Dick, who said, "Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away." So it's a great quote that she shared from, again, it's Philip K. Dick who said it, or he's credited with it. Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. But listen, sometimes folks are stuck in a what's her name say? Alternative facts. Sometimes folks are stuck in alternative facts worlds, right? A different reality. Now, that's all well and good, but sometimes there's what I've been thinking of as gravity, reality, gravity. Like there are some facts that you just can't get away from. If you think that gravity is just a conspiracy theory, go ahead and test it. It's not going to work out well for you, right? So there's some facts, there's some reality, if you will, that it just is what it is. So reality sometimes hits you in the face. Or a more diplomatic way of putting it is reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. But we have to accept the fact that some folks are in different realities. And we're not going to change it like a snap of the fingers, but we can change it 1 degree at a time. And Mike also is helpful. I asked him, okay, so this is the reality, if you will, different people in, how did he put it, informational universes, and people inhabiting different informational universes is how he put it. And so my question is, what do we do about it? And he started to point the way forward, and I hope we explore this further. But what we do about it, the way he put it in that piece on Substack, is effective communication across bubbles requires more than simply correcting facts. It demands engaging underlying values and concerns. Engaging underlying values and concerns. So if there's somebody, in my case, I'm not a Trump fan. And again, if you're listening for the first time, I need to always clarify this. I am not a Democrat. I'm an independent. I'm truly an independent because when I get my ballot, sometimes there's Republicans I vote for, sometimes there's Democrats I vote for. I'm a pro-democracy, pro-democratic republic, constitutional order kind of a guy. But because I'm, I guess you could say now, classically conservative, because I'm a conservative, because I'm a Christian, that makes me very much opposed to Trump. So, I got a good buddy who wears his clean up on aisle 46 hat. He's making fun of Biden. Not that Biden was my favorite president, but I get it. He's poking fun at anybody who's outside of the Trump circle. And it's this red hat that looks like a MAGA hat. So sometimes he wears his Trump 45, 47 or MAGA 45, 47 hat. But he and I get along really well. And I think one of the reasons that he and I get along really well is pointing to what Mike was talking about, underlying values and concerns. Now, we have different ways of viewing things, different ways that we're going to end up voting, a lot of differences. But there are basic values and concerns that we share. Or a better example is, last year we had Joe Walsh and Fred Guttenberg on the show, and they're on very, very different sides of Second Amendment oriented issues, gun rights legislation. Joe being as a self-proclaimed rabid gun rights advocate, and Fred having tragically lost his daughter in the shooting in Florida in 2017, and the Parkland shooting, that is. So they're on very different sides of that debate. Fred's been very active in trying to pass legislation around the country for reasonable, sensible gun laws, and very different sides. But they were on program after program together because they were being invited on to debate this issue. Producers rightly thinking, "Hey, got two guys that are very, opinionated and on two very different sides of the issue. Fireworks will ensue." And after the second or third time that Fred and Joe were on shows together in the green room, they started talking to each other just as people, and they became buddies. And they were doing exactly this. They were finding in underlying values, shared values and concerns, shared underlying values and concerns. It's just such a great way to think of it. So that is really encouraging. So I just wanted to frame what I was going to talk about today. I haven't even gotten into it yet. I don't know how many minutes we're into this conversation yet, but I did want to share an experience I had and then maybe leave you with a few how-tos since this is the direction that we're going. I posted something that I thought had a chance of just being completely ignored because I simply posted a quotation from of a passage from the Constitution, just word for word, no commentary. And that is from Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution. The, the part that I just put up was, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of the Congress, accept of any present, emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state. Article 1, Section 9. No commentary. That's all I posted. And I figured there's a good chance this will get completely ignored. Boy, was I wrong. But I thought there was a chance that it would get some activity, maybe some likes and some comments and stuff. But it just kind of took off. And what I'll say is it's always informative to see who is the most vocal in there. And I know when I look at the names of the people who like it, a lot of people, it's on Facebook. So I try to set my settings. This is interesting. So I set my settings so that only friends can comment. Anybody can like or, thumbs down or whatever it is. But only friends can comment. But on this one, there were two people that I know I'm not friends with or connected with on Facebook that ended up leaving comments. So that was interesting. And I wonder why that happened. I did check my settings to make sure that that's how my settings are because I want to have, for lack of a better word, a digital gated community, at least on certain platforms, so that I have some connection to the people that I'm curating these conversations with. But a couple people commented, kind of a side note. But what I'll say is, of the people that object, there were a lot of people who knew knew that there was a newsworthy reference that passage from the Constitution pertains to. There are several actually, and obviously one was the donation of a freaking $400 million airplane to Donald Trump, and there have been any number of other breaches of this particular passage from Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. So I figured, hey, let's see where this goes. So there were a number of people who understood that there was a particular reference that I had in mind without me even having to comment on it. And they, expressed solidarity with that principle, with that virtue that we should hold on to. And there are a number of others who, man, it was like their hair was on fire. It was like, I didn't know that just quoting from the Constitution would oppress their fragile, snowflakey, whatever. Sorry, I'm making a comment about these people. Okay, the people who objected, I'll leave it at that. I will just say that there were a number of people who objected. Now, I will classify some of those objections because I know most of these folks, some way better than others. And there was one fella who I'll say he's a good person, but he's also someone who lacks nuance. He's not particularly inquisitive, but I think his intentions are at least in the right place. He thinks I get the impression that he thinks he's standing up for what he believes is right. But the issue that I have with this individual is that he's only showing up on my pages not to like a picture of my dog, not to like a picture of my kids, not to say, I don't know, maybe he said happy birthday about 6 years ago, but that's about it. But he only shows up to contend with something like this when he thinks that his side is being offended and not in any other way. So I still think the dude is basically a good dude, but like I said, just not very curious and only showing up to contend with something he thinks I'm saying. So there's that. There are a couple other fellas who also good good guys. I get along with them well. One fella in particular, I know he feels passionately about some of these issues, but I give him a lot of credit because when I engage with him in a serious way, he he softens at least to be able to talk to me as a buddy as opposed to a partisan adversary. And I appreciate that. And he also, because I engage with him in a certain kind of a way where I'm acknowledging his passion for certain causes and positions, he also adjusts the way that he engages, and it's in a neighborly way. And I really appreciate that he still has his views. He's still passionate about his views, but he engages in a neighborly way. There's another fellow who used to be a lot worse. I've been engaged. There was a site that or a page that I was involved with called Point Counterpoint that actually my dad, who's been on the show a few times, he curated with a couple of other what do you call it, moderators. And that's like 10, 15 years ago. And this fellow used to be a lot, I would call it worse, but a lot more, I'll just say partisan and predictable. So that if you listened to, I referred to Hannity before, for example. I think I referred to Hannity, but I was thinking Hannity. But if you listen to Hannity's opening soliloquy on his radio show or his TV show, you know exactly what this particular fella was going to come out. He was going to come out with, and basically repeating some of those talking points. But every once in a while, this fellow shows some thoughtfulness and nuance. Um, and when he does that, he's actually been persuasive. He's when he's more in depth, and I can tell it's his own thinking and not talking points that he's simply just kind of dropping in as like his way of like representing his side. When they're his thoughts and they're more fleshed out in his his particular unique way of communicating, it gets me to think too. So that's helpful. And then a lot of times he just reverts back to that partisan sort of bickering thing. Um, there's also, listen, it's not just from guys that are, broadly speaking, Fox News, right leaning or far right, information ecosystem, information universe again. Sometimes it's somebody who is, you know, admittedly pretty far left, and I don't, I don't, I don't like it when there's someone who goes over the line and makes generalizations, regardless of whether they think of themselves as far left or, hardcore conservative or whatever label they're putting on themselves or how they think of themselves, wherever it's coming from. But one fellow sometimes makes generalizations and at times ends up being judgmental about all of them, all of those people, the people that are not part of his ecosystem, right? And it shows up, the way it shows up is there's hyperbole that he'll use to characterize the other side as he thinks of it. So I don't appreciate that either. There's another fellow that it was one of the fellows that isn't even a connection of mine. I know who he is from this, specifically from this other page that my father and Mike Gaston, who I've referred to, a pastor friend of mine, moderated together. That I specifically didn't want to be. I didn't become friends with him. I didn't want to connect. I didn't invite him. I don't know if he ever invited me to connect with him on Facebook, but I specifically had zero interest because I found he's somebody that I would call a literate idiot, meaning this person has clearly read a lot. He clearly has I'm guessing a high IQ, a pretty wide vocabulary, and a lot of, I'm not going to call it smart because it's not really smart so much as his version of witty, but really sarcastic and highly predictable, just thoroughly uninteresting because it's a person who is predictable because we know that his compass, where his compass is set, his moral, political, philosophical compass is not necessarily set to his, having been influenced by great thinkers and great philosophers and great writers of our day or historically. His political compass is set to owning the libs. You know, whatever contemporaneously, that means, or at least over the last 10 years or so, whatever Donald Trump does is good, and whoever opposes him is bad. And that's his entire worldview. So he's entirely predictable. Yes, he probably would be tested. If he was tested, he would probably come out to have a high IQ. I'm guessing that he's read a lot and has memorized a lot and has, like I said, fancy words that he can use, just like me. Listen, I'm prone to throwing out epistemological, stuff like that as well. But he's a literate idiot because there's no original thought, there's no reflection, there's certainly no intellectual humility there. And the reasons that he shows up, and again, I don't know how Facebook allowed him to comment because I specifically want to weed some of this out so that we can have more in-depth connections and conversations that are meaningful and weed out the guys who are only showing up to contend, to fight, to own the libs. That's so uninteresting to me. That's so unproductive. But this is a fella. It was actually the first person who commented on this quote. And again, it was just he was regurgitating something that Ann Coulter said. So there's that. And then there was another person who I hate doing this, but it was one of the I can count on one hand. I think it was two, maybe three people over the last year. And that's it that I unfriended. That got to a point where I just unfriended them. And this was one of these people. I unfriended him, and yet he left a comment. And the reason I unfriended him is, I'll just say it. The guy, there are some people who are intellectually gifted, and there are some people who are not. Interpret that as you will. And listen, some folks overcome it by working hard and reading a lot and trying to build their base of knowledge. And some people, it's just not their thing. They're not particularly curious, and that they have a lot of other merits and virtues, but the intellectual capacity just isn't there. So this dude is one of those people, and and that's okay. It's okay. But what's not okay is you have to at least recognize that. And if you recognize that you don't have an intellectual capacity, that that's not one of your gifts, like my brother and I say, it's like gosh, so far I have the G rating, but I'm going to get the PG rating. You can't also be an asshole. If you're dumb as a rock, you can't afford to be an asshole. So this guy is dumb as a rock, and somehow at some point he became a complete freaking asshole. So that's this guy. And again, his page is littered. I went to his page just to see, has he changed at all? Is he less of an asshole now? No, the answer is no. Because gosh, literally a dozen times a day, Kamala's so stupid. This misogynistic stuff still about she lost. Get over it, dude. The Dems are such, Democrats, with the capital RAT, Democrats, the left losing, losing, losing. Trump this, Trump winning. It's just literally a dozen times a day. How do you like it now? Lefty, Marxist, whatever. Dude, enough. Just, and it took me a while to actually unfriend him, but there's a certain point where I'm not doing him any favors. He's certainly not doing me any favors. And he's not just looking to contend and debate. He's looking to just fist fight, rhetorically fist fight. And as much as I try to use everything I've learned from wonderful people like Monty Guzman and David Brooks of how to reach people across our differences and leading with curiosity and all these things, he just wasn't having it. So there's a lot of folks who piped up, and again, he's not a friend anymore. I had to back away. I had to love him, but love him from far away, which I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, for having merely posted a quote from the Constitution, there are a lot of people. I just listed off a few of them without naming names, and you could on my Facebook page, you can go and find it, and try to match up who I'm talking about. But I don't need to name their names here. But there's a lot of people who are just like so upset and objected so vigorously with quoting from the Constitution. It was pretty funny, entertaining, but also for people that were willing, because there were a few people in there, like I said, who are capable of nuance, capable of conversation, and here's how. When there is an opportunity, I look for it. I look for it. So one of the ways that helps for people who are willing, not people who are just looking to come in and debate, people who come in and want to throw punches, like a couple of the guys that I sketched out for you, the profiles that I sketched out for you. But for a majority of folks who objected, a majority of these folks who are in their specific information universe, they're still human beings, right? And that's job number one, is to remember that they're human beings. And one of the reasons I do set my settings to only friends can comment is because I want to have human to human contact and see the humanity in the person that I'm engaging with. And also that others who are participating in there and engaging with others across differences can at least remember, hey, if you guys don't know each other, at least you both know me. So that's why I want to keep it just to friends or connections on this platform, Facebook. So one of the ways that I do that is like when you're in person with somebody, you can actively listen, be a loud listener. Oh, that's interesting. Or one of the ways that you can actively listen on Facebook is to reiterate back to someone the best argument of what they just said, like the best articulation of what you think they just said. And it goes a long way because some folks feel like they just haven't been listened to, you know? They just haven't been listened to, and they want to be able to get something off their chest. It's been bothering them. They don't really talk about this with anybody except, maybe if they're yelling at their radio or their podcast in the car and they're getting all this information, and they have no place to air what they're thinking and what they're concerned about. So just listening goes a long way. And what that does is it allows you through your actions, through active listening, to affirm your friendship and even affirm your respect for that individual, affirm your admiration for that individual. That goes a long way. Okay, so that's one. Another one I already alluded to, Monty Guzman. She is the curiosity queen, right? She's awesome at this, at equipping folks to lead with curiosity instead of contentiousness. There are so many others who are doing great work, Braver Angels more broadly, leading with curiosity. Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that? Could you expound on that? I hadn't thought of it that way, or the name of her book. I never thought of it that way. Into it, I never thought of, huh? Could you tell me more? That's and allowing someone to open up about their a deeper. I did this when I got a haircut last week, and I asked my friend who cuts my hair. There were some things that baffled me, so I was just, that when did you when did you arrive at that conclusion? Like, tell me about that. So okay, so you read certain websites. You read this book, when you were in high school, and so you're still thinking about it. That's pretty cool, And then it opened her up to telling me a story, and I got to know her. And also, she said something. She goes, "So I'm really smart, but just don't tell anybody." Like her self-perception is that people don't look at her as being smart or well read or anything along those lines. And she said it to me. She's like, just don't tell anybody. It's like her little secret that she's actually, she's thoughtful and has read things, so that was interesting. But it's good to connect and give someone the opportunity to feel like they've been heard and seen, right? Leading with curiosity. I also, another thing I do is I hunt for the serious. I'm on the hunt for the serious. I'm looking for ways and reasons to take someone seriously. Because a lot of times, listen, the default way that people engage is by like shooting people down and being snarky and making fun of somebody, and sometimes it's well deserved. Let's face it. I described a couple of profiles up before that they they invite the mockery, but a majority of people don't. So I am, even if it's a longer comment and a lot of it is just anger and resentment and grievances and talking points, but buried within that longer comment, there's a serious point. So I'm hunting for the serious and I'm looking for ways to take someone seriously. So I'll do that, and I'll engage on that one part. Instead of fighting back or feeling defensive about something they're attacking me about, I'll look for the serious point and I'll engage with that serious point on a serious level and take that person seriously. And then all of a sudden, our conversation changes. Then that person feels heard, feels seen, feels like they're being taken seriously. And now we can have a conversation instead of a contest, right? So I'm hunting for the serious. And listen, every once in a while, I will contend. I will fight back. I will throw a rhetorical punch. So sometimes that'll happen, right? But I'm going to pick my spots. I'm going to pick my spots, and I'm going to pick with whom I'm doing it, right? I'm not going to use that as my default. I'm not going to say that's my last resort, but I'm going to do it in such a way. I'm going to, like, listen, the dude that commented first, he said something. It was basically regurgitating something Ann Coulter said about the Statue of Liberty, and like this dude has, man, years ago, I did everything I could to take him seriously, to engage with him in a serious way, to learn where he was coming from, but he just wasn't having it, and he earned his place of he earned the title of literate idiot. So and the fact that we're not friends and he's commenting on my post, like, no, dude, sorry. And so there's nothing I'm going to do except introduce reality, gravity. And I recounted the fact. Anyway, I I recounted with facts, with historical facts that, for example, Congress, I'm not going to get into it, but there's historical context to the difference between the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue accepting a $400 million plane versus our country being gifted the Statue of Liberty. Um, a lot of differences there, but there was nothing I was going to do to persuade this individual. He was merely looking to be contentious. He was bringing up a point that he thought he could just kind of drop it in there and, oh, yeah, I showed them. But there is historical fact and historical context there being passed by Congress, going through the constitutional process of accepting such a gift, let alone the fact that, Grover Cleveland didn't use it as his personal residence after it wasn't donated to the Grover Cleveland Library or anything like that. Anyway, I didn't want to get into it, but yeah, sometimes you got to pick your spots. And more often, I'm going to pick a spot to push back on someone, to respectfully introduce a different idea when there is that connection, when I know that there is a relationship there, when I know that we've been having a more in-depth conversation, when I know that person has had the opportunity to share their perspectives, and I'll pick one thing that I can introduce and say, hey, I don't know if you thought of this, but, and I'll introduce something. So pick your spot. Pick your spot. Also, know your limits. Like I said, the guy who's both dumb and an asshole, yeah, I got to know my limits. I got to know that nothing good is coming from my continuing to engage with this individual. I'm not doing him any good. He's certainly not doing me any good. He's certainly not adding a constructive, positive dimension to these conversations. And that's typically where he was showing up. So I have to know my limits. I have to know that he basically just pisses me off, and I probably just piss him off. So I got to know that about myself. And that is one of the few times in the last entire year, where I actually unfriended somebody because I don't want to give up on somebody. I don't want to do that. But I do have to know where that line is. And listen, sometimes with some people, it does call for candor and even confrontation. So I already kind of alluded to this, picking your spots. But here are some, they're not rules, but guidelines, I guess. One is when I'm going to confront someone, I don't want to do what's called punching down, you know. So this happens more now on YouTube where it's somebody I don't know, but it's somebody that's not equipped with a lot of information, or I don't know, not that someone's following is a way to measure anything of substance, but like if somebody doesn't have any followers on one of the other Blue Sky or Twitter or any of the other platforms, then I don't want to make a mockery of someone that is just, I don't know, this is going to sound, now I'm going to sound like an asshole, but somebody that's not in my league, you know, there's there's nothing good that can come out of that. If anything, I'll just say, hey, thanks for your comment, you know, and that I'll leave it at that. But I'm not going to punch down. Also, if I'm going to confront someone and be like more directly confrontational, I'm going to do it as a last resort. I'm going to exhaust a lot of other options of engaging with them, taking them seriously, finding, you know, hunting for the serious, listening to them, actively listening to them, affirming my respect for them, you know, leading with curiosity. I'll exhaust a lot of other options of engaging with them before I am directly confrontational, right? And then what I will do is I'll also prioritize the relationship. So if it's getting to the point where I think our I'm prioritizing a point that I want to make over and above the relationship, at that point I back off. At that point I say, no, you know, someone said something to me recently that it really had a positive effect on me. And he said, listen, if this is going to in any way affect our relationship, forget it. There's nothing in this world that's making a point or winning a point, winning a debate, you know, convincing you of like, you know, there's nothing that's worth risking our relationship over. It was really meaningful that he said that, and I think it's a really good point. A couple other things I'll say, and then we'll start to wrap it up. But one is, again, I've mentioned this before, but give yourself that grace. You're going to mess this thing up. And listen, I don't follow these rules myself. I break all these rules myself all the time. So you got to give yourself grace. You got to get dirty and mess it up and just it. But that's how you move forward. That's how you get better. You mess it up and then you live to fight another day or live to love another day, like I talked about with Reverend Dr. Serene Jones, that the episode that we released early this week. Live to love another day. So give yourself grace that you're going to mess it up. Give the other person grace that they're not going to be perfect. They're not so focused on how to do this talk of politics and religion without killing each other thing better. They're just talking about something they don't get to talk about a lot. So give yourself some grace that you're going to mess it up, but try to learn from each encounter and get better for the next one. So give yourself grace, you know, and then sometimes with somebody you just can't talk about it. It's not going to go in. They're not comfortable. You're not comfortable. It's, you know, pounding your head against a brick wall, and it's not doing anything. So sometimes talk about baseball, talk about ice cream, talk about, I don't know, whatever, something else. Just talk about something else. A couple other things I've done that's really helpful is I take it offline. I'll talk to somebody in a direct message, or an IM, depending on the platform, whatever they call it. And then I'll ask somebody to get together, you know, get together one on one, take it offline. Because if you're in one of these public conversations, whether it's digital or, you know, a larger group gathering, and the how you're engaging with them isn't really going anywhere productive, it's not evolving in anything constructive, hit them up offline and say, hey, you know, let's just have a more in-depth one-on-one conversation because I feel like there's something there worth pursuing. And whenever possible, do it in person. Get coffee, get a drink, get a beer, get a lunch, get a something in person whenever possible, because that really helps. Then when you see somebody's face in front of you in like the real world in person, then you got to deal with their face. You know, you got to deal with their humanity. So take it offline is another way that I do it. And then sometimes you just got to call it a day. Sometimes you just got to, all right, I'm done here. Adios. Some folks have done that on my site, and it's my fault. Sometimes they just back out. They don't want to talk about it. Somebody I'm talking to in person, they're done. And sometimes you have to do that as well. I have to do that as well. Just call it a day. So went longer than I thought I would, but just to sum up, uh, when we engage, there's all different kinds of people who will encounter, from literate idiots to a good person who just lacks the nuance and inquisitiveness, uh, other good people who just feel strongly but will respond to a genuine outreach. There are folks who are purely partisan and resort to hyperbole and talking points, uh, that also can respond to genuine outreach with when you're hunting for the serious, when you're kind of weeding out the hyperbole and the talking points, and you're engaging with the serious, with the original thought. And then some people are just dumb and they're assholes. So that's when I'm like, okay, that's not somebody that I'm going to have any productive conversation with. So there's a lot of different kinds of folks that we encounter that come from other perspectives. And sometimes we're those people. Sometimes I'm acting dumb and I'm an asshole. Sometimes that's possible too. And the ways that some tools in the toolbox. Remember, different people are in different epistemic bubbles, informational universes, as Mike Madrid put it. It's always a good idea to listen. So a lot of folks just are never heard. They never have an opportunity to talk to somebody, to share what they're thinking about these important issues. Set the compass to curiosity. If you can set your compass, if somebody else's compass is whatever Trump does is great, whatever people who don't like Trump are bad, that's their compass. That's not my compass. My compass is set to curiosity. When I'm talking to somebody, I want to keep on adjusting and readjusting so that my default posture is curious about this person, about their views, about how they arrive at their views, and just that level of connection. That's my compass, right? I hunt for the serious. I If I am contending with someone, if I'm offering a different perspective, I will try to pick one spot or one point. I'm not going to try to overwhelm them with an entire, new language or an entire different worldview, but I'll pick one spot. I also got to know my limits. Sometimes I just got to call it a day. And I'm not doing well with this individual. They're not doing well with me. Or a subject is just too, I can't do it. So know your limits. And sometimes you do have to go for candor and even confrontation. But again, pick those spots. Give yourself grace. You'll mess it up in all kinds of ways, but keep on coming back. Keep on coming back. Wake up, dust yourself off, go back into another conversation, try to learn from the last one. You're going to mess it up. Give yourself grace. Sometimes just talk about something else. Sometimes you can't talk about the subject with an individual that is so far apart and it just gets too heated. So sometimes you just got to talk about business, talk about the Mets. That's always good to talk about. A lot of times it's also good to take it offline. Direct message somebody, I am somebody, whatever it's called, and whenever possible, do it in person. Or again, just call it a day. Just call it a day. Sometimes you just got to give yourself a Sabbath rest from all this nonsense. So a lot there. Thanks for bearing with me. That's all I got today. As always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow the show, write that review, and now you can watch these conversations on YouTube and support us on Patreon. It's youtube.com/@politicsandreligion. And I am at Corey S. Nathan on all the socials, at Corey S. Nathan, at COREY, S as in Sam, NATHAN. We have those links in the show notes. Your support really does make a difference. So thank you for all of it. Now go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.